I am delighted to be joined by Leandros Ntolas, who created After Nature Studios and who is about to release or has released by the time this episode goes out. Uh, Benign Land, which is an adventure narrative game set entirely in Ireland. So naturally, me being Irish, I wanted to know everything I could about this. So I practically insisted that Leandros join the podcast, or I would go to his house to find out more. So, hello, Leandros. Thank you for joining the podcast. Thank you for agreeing to speak to me at such short notice. And
Hello, Josh.
how are you doing?
I'm great. I'm great. It's great to be here. Very excited to talk to you about the game and anything else that comes our way.
Yeah, no, myself as well. I mean, I'm always on the lookout for any games, adventure or otherwise, set in my home country of Ireland because there aren't many. I know that we were talking beforehand that there might be some missions in some games or some scenes set, or maybe in a version of Ireland, but
Right.
this is one of the very few games, certainly adventure games, that I believe is set entirely in Ireland. So, and about Irish history and leading up to the present day, set well, close to the present day, set in the Troubles, which we'll
Mhm.
be talking about, which was that horrific time in Northern Ireland for several decades.
Yeah.
So not many games are set in this period alone. But
Right.
anyway, before we start talking about the game itself, as I ask every developer, if you wanted to give a very quick introduction about yourself and what are some of your favorite adventure or narrative games?
Right. So my name is Leandros Ntolas. I'm originally from Greece, from Athens, but I reside in the Netherlands for the last 8 years. I'm the founder of After Nature Productions. It's a studio, a gaming studio I created in 2022 with a vision to create narrative games that try something a bit unconventional, a bit unique. They're aimed at a more mature audience, let's say. They might explore deeper themes, and there's an emphasis on storytelling and art direction. A lot of the influence come from art house cinema, especially European art house cinema. Anyway, this is the first project that sees the light of day. We've been working on another one I might talk about a bit later, but it's very important to mention at this point that my background is in art, so I don't have any education in game design or games. I started as a visual artist, as a sculptor, and then went into interdisciplinary art, light installations, art installations, also teaching a bit. But the last 3 years have been more or less full time busy with game development. So it started fascinating me, and I see an opportunity there to create things that haven't been done before, and to even kind of bring the medium to a next stage of its evolution, let's say, that might even appeal to a different type of audience, not the current, let's say, core gamer. Um, did I cover all your questions?
I think so. And do you
Yeah.
have any favorites? I know you didn't
Favorite
come
games,
from
yeah, of course.
games. You don't come from a background of game development to more of an
Yeah,
artist,
yeah, yeah.
but do you have any favorites adventure or narrative games? I don't know if you
Definitely,
grew up
definitely,
playing any of
yeah.
these games.
So, for me, full disclosure, I loved games when I was a kid, and then had a break for like 10 years when I was so much into art, and then I picked them up again somewhere around COVID. And I think one that really stands out, and maybe it's also the reason I'm here, is Disco Elysium. I don't know if it counts as that adventure game. I guess so.
I mean, we covered it on the podcast. I mean, I think
Right,
it
right.
is. There was someone who said that it's literally an RPG because there's literally dice in it. Which, yeah, fair enough. But it
It,
is
it,
also point and click, so it is.
it,
Yeah,
it's many things. Disco
it's a
Elysium
fantastic
and
game anyway. That's the main
fantastic game.
thing.
It's an adventure of the soul, or the psyche, or
Yes.
whatever you would like to call it. So that's one that stands out. Again, very conventional. The setting, the humor. They did try something different. They did come from a different background. Again, from the arts, from writing, from music. So that was a huge inspiration for me. And if I have to mention some other games, Alan Wake 2 was again a very good one. Again, combining more gameplay in terms of like survival horror, but also the narrative behind it, and I really like Remedy and Sam Lake and what they do. I follow them. I think they have again this unconventional approach to things. Also, this more art house aesthetics that I enjoy very much. Um, the Stranding stood out for me again. Kojima, again, as a creator, I like weirdness. I like weird. I like the supernatural elements that it might have. Of course, again, adventure, walking simulator. I don't know. There's been quite some debate there, but and I can go on and on. But
Yeah, they're fantastic examples. I mean,
yeah, yeah,
and actually, funny enough, you mentioned those two games, Alan Wake 2 and Death Stranding, because in that order, I've tried to play those two games on my aging computer.
right.
But I couldn't, I mean, I can just barely get Alan Wake 2 to work, but I keep getting error messages come up saying your graphics can't work with this computer and all of these messages I don't really understand. And then I play it, but it starts to stutter and I'm
Yeah.
thinking, okay, no, I have to wait to invest in a new computer to really enjoy it. And then I tried playing Death Stranding, and then I got this error about a few minutes in, probably about an hour in. I finished the prologue, I loved it. But
Mm.
then again, I got this error during one of the cutscenes that again just crashed the game, and I think it's because of the computer. So yeah, but it's funny. Those two games, I've tried playing
Yeah.
them in order, and but I've had no luck
Well,
so far.
you'll get your chance. I think they're both worth it. So
Yeah, I've
yeah,
read that they're both worth it. So because I've
yeah, yeah,
enjoyed even the little bits of prologues of the two games. Um,
yeah, yeah.
so yeah, you do seem to like abstract, kind of unconventional storytelling in games because those are three fantastic examples of three games that I don't
Right.
think people can say that these games are just tick boxes or done by committee. You can tell that they're by visionaries, that they're
There's a
uh,
creative vision behind that might be even
exactly.
stronger than commercial and marketing kind of
Yeah, which is great to
mindset.
see. And
Yeah.
actually, from what I can see of your game, Benign Land, I mean, I know you've been making this game on your own, but it seems to have your vision behind it as well. So it's great that they are inspirations. I suppose before we get to you and your game, what about those games that you mentioned? I know you've mentioned a little bit
Mm.
about them, but
Yeah.
what in particular about the narratives of the three games of Disco Elysium, Alan Wake 2, and Death Stranding kind of stood out to you?
I mean, they all have, I guess, the different elements to them that attracted me. All three of them, they share some things. They share some, again, unconventionalities, some sort of weirdness, some sort of supernatural element to them. Um, but and also they share, I guess that's also one thing that appeals very much to me, like art direction and atmosphere. So they're very atmospheric games. They kind of
Mm.
immerse you in there, like just the pacing. It's not full of quick gameplay actions or UI. So it's a bit more this, I, I guess, more cinematic type of storytelling. Even for Disco Elysium being a top down, still with its atmosphere and the soundtrack, it really grabs you and you're there. Of course, they have different elements in terms of narrative. Like Disco Elysium is a masterpiece in the branching dialogue and branching narrative, and being an RPG. So it used the elements of a CRPG, like Fallout or Planescape Torment, and then it brought them to the next level with a different feel to them, like this maturity it had, this kind of main character being this underdog and this alcoholic with all kinds of problems, from memory loss to heartbreak, and needing to deal with these problems with a murder and trying to solve it, and you being put in his shoes. It was a great experience. Against, like, wow, can you do that? Like, it was for me, it was a bit of a eureka moment. It was actually one of the very first games that I played after my hiatus or my break. So it's like, wow, that
What a
you
game to
can
come
do.
back to.
Yeah, yeah. It's like, can you do that? That's great, and then it's like, okay, if you can do that, what else can you do? Alan Wake, like, atmosphere is amazing. This kind of otherworldly, misty, also in the environments, in the city of I get stuck. I forgot the name of the city. It will come to me. But this small town community in America, kind of inspiration by Twin Peaks, but also the dark place, of course, where Alan Wake is trapped in the shadows. But in the way it combines the narrative with gameplay, so I think it was a very balanced game, even more
Mm,
than the first one, in the sense that it kept the action moments to a minimum so that it kept the tension, and when it hit, it really hit. So I think they managed to not overdo it, not fill it up with kind of survival horror moments of shooting or the
mm,
shadows, but still keep the tension throughout. Um, and of course, the narrative is very complex. It has this kind of investigation mindset that they try to pull off a bit, like True Detective, like you're trying to piece the pieces of this case together. But I think overall it worked very well. And again, that's more specific, but I really enjoyed from a technical perspective, the live action parts. So they implemented live action
mm,
and some kind of VFX type of effects that you've never seen in games in that way. And actually, these have been an inspiration for Benign Land for certain of the VFX that I put there, because I tried to combine live action VFX and digital VFX in a way that you're not very sure what's going on there. Um, Death Stranding has a different appeal to it. Of course, has Kojima behind it as a creative genius that you say, okay, I want to see what he has to offer. I had played before, not all of the Metal Gear, but just the last one. But I've read books from him, so I like him as a personality. In terms of story, it's almost too hard to go through the full game. If I'm being very honest, like
there's a lot
Kojima
to
tends
it. I've
tends to
read.
indulge in his own stuff and kind of write and write and write and like what's happening here, and a lot of exposition through the, I don't know, the emails you're getting. But this running had again something like quite unconventional in the sense of combining this atmosphere of being alone in this landscape in this post-apocalyptic world. So the feel of the game was great. It was combining even strategy elements in terms of the gameplay. So you needed to kind of plan your route. What tools do you need? How can you reach there? So there was a lot of decisions happening, and also the kind of tiny bit of the survival horror element. So there's these entities that you need to avoid.
Mm,
So still this stealthy type of, not really action. So I felt it had like a great array of different elements that were brought together in a very interesting way, and very unconventional way. So I can just appreciate it for being brave enough to try all these things and put them together. And I understand these games, also Death Stranding is not a game for everyone, and it has had like its own backlash, people calling it walking simulator in a negative way, or
mm.
Amazon simulator. But still, I think it was a unique thing. And the actors and the cinematic quality and the soundtrack, it managed to create something quite new. And actually, I don't think there has been something since then that comes close to.
Yeah, maybe until Death Stranding into the, I think, the beach. That's
Yeah,
the second game. But yeah, no, well,
second one.
fantastic answers there. I'm
Mhm.
even looking forward to even more now playing Alan Wake 2 and Death Stranding after after
Yeah, yeah,
that.
yeah, yeah. You should.
I should get a new computer. If anybody listening or watching wants to get me a new computer? No, no, I'm kidding. I mean, don't know if I'm allowed to do that, but but yeah, look, I'll have to invest in a new computer at some point and be able to play those games.
Mhm.
But yeah, no, well, fantastic games, fantastic influences. But now before you mentioned at the beginning that you you didn't come from a game development
Mhm.
background, that you are
Mhm.
an artist, and I think that doesn't surprise me watching videos and screenshots of Benign Lands, because I mean every game is artistic, but the screens look like paintings. And
Yeah.
they do look like that they could be, from paintings, like
Mhm.
moving paintings here. They look very unique.
Mhm.
So I suppose tell us how, before we get into the game development, about your background. So you became is it an artist or a sculptor, and what? Again, I don't know much about sculpting or art, so I can't
No
really go
worries.
deep into this. But what kind of things did you do? What kind of paintings, or what drew you into becoming an artist?
Right. How much time do you have? No, because I started very very young actually.
Mm.
So I grew up in a kind of creative environment with music and artists around me in my family. But I got interested into kind of art, drawing, and sculpture when I was like 14 or so. So I joined some workshops. I was already involved. I was lucky enough to have some great people around me. And then I joined. I went to fine arts in Greece, in Athens. A very good school, a bit more, how do you say, old school in terms of the mediums they use. So I've gone through everything. I've gone through drawing, painting with color, with oil. I've done sculpture. I've done figurative sculpture, so models and heads. I've worked with marble. I've worked with in public space, so large pieces. Metal, you name it, ceramics. But kind of my graduation work and kind of where this went to towards the end was more into using light as my medium, and that goes this experimental trajectory where you start using more unconventional mediums like light and sound and interactivity in a way that you try to compose experiences for a viewer that are they're not an object anymore. They're not like a sculpture of or an object of aesthetic kind of where you get pleasure out of looking at it, but it's something more. It immerses the viewer in a certain situation. And just to jump to games, I think the mindset and the thinking is very close because in games, in this virtual world, you're creating immersion, you're creating an
Mm.
experience that is very holistic. So you have visuals, you have sound, you have narrative, you have a certain experience, you have lighting, depending on the game you're making, of course. But many of these sensitivities that I have grown there, I think, are now sipping or coming to the game development projects I'm working on. But anyway, long story short, then I did a master's in the Netherlands, where I'm still at, called art science, very experimental stuff. I dived even more into light as a medium and perception and all kinds of interesting things. And I'm still busy with that. So perhaps that could be also a good bridge towards Benign Land.
I was
That's
just going to say, I mean, you mentioned light, and actually, I think in every screenshot that I have open in front of me now, it's there is some form of light
exactly,
in
yeah.
it. That there's some sort of light source. And now
Yeah.
there's the lighthouse, and it's dark, but
Mm,
there seems to be some form of light source in
mm,
every screenshot.
yeah.
So yeah, so you studied and you to do the masters, and then you started making this game. So, as we mentioned, Benign Land. First of all, what can you tell us about for people who haven't heard or read about the game?
Mm,
As I said, it's set in Ireland, but what else can you tell us?
yeah.
What can you tell us about this game?
So perhaps, yeah. How should I approach it?
And I mean, as you wish, but if you wanted,
No, no.
or the setting, or yeah,
So maybe I'll talk a bit about the story of the project, how it began.
sure.
Again, I've had a career in the arts and whatever, so I started with game development, but I have this kind of parallel practice, and I was invited to create an artwork in Belfast. So I was commissioned by an art organization called Household Belfast to come to Ireland, stay there for 2 weeks, investigate its history, investigate the place, the people, and make something out of it. So this opportunity to create something that could exist as an art installation, but also as a game, as a project that you can download from Steam, whatever. So to answer your question, Benign Land is a I wouldn't even call it an adventure game if I'm being very honest. It's hard to define as a game because it doesn't fall into that easily into any other category. It does its own thing. The closest one the closest genre you can pick is a walking simulator, and if I'm being more specific, it's a floating simulator because again, it doesn't follow the conventional walking simulator recipe of like having hearing the footsteps or having the spacing. the core idea Benign Land is that you're either in a dream or in an after death experience, and you're drifting through scenes that relate to Ireland and Ireland's past. And there's an abstract narrative that unfolds that goes from pagan times to Christianity and to through the famine to more recent events like the Troubles. So at the end, it kind of touches on that side of Northern Ireland's history. Again, because it was set in Belfast, it's a bit more tied to that region in a way, but also not necessarily only Northern Ireland. Um, this journey unfolds in a way you feel as if you're floating inside this dream. You don't have full control of your movement, and then in every scene there's this, I call it, portal or threshold that kind of, as you enter, it sucks you into the next scene and the next scene. And then this, it's a quite short experience. It's like 30 minutes in total, but it's actually looping, so you could keep doing this forever, as if, again, as if you're trapped in a dream or in this plane between life and death. And some inspiration for that were actually also tied to Irish, let's say, folklore or mythology, especially the Samhain and the otherworld. So for those of you who do not know, Samhain is the kind of ancestor of Halloween. So at the end of October, early November, there was this notion that at that time of the year, the veil between this world and the other world is the thinnest. So they call it the thinning of the veil. And during that time, maybe spirits or ghosts from the other side might come to our world, and maybe vice versa. And it was also connected with kind of pagan Ireland, megalithic Ireland, and people said that maybe some of these megalithic monuments or the tombs were kind of gates to the other world. So the exhibition in Belfast was actually exactly on Samhain, so it was 1st of November. It was exhibited. So what I created there, and now I'm jumping a bit between the art
No, it's
installation
fine.
and the
It's
experience. What I created there, it was an installation in public space, and I was exhibiting within this beautiful church. It was a deconsecrated church called the Carlisle Memorial Church, and I had the whole space for this experience to create something. And I had Benign Land as an interactive experience presented in a 6-meter LED screen within the church, and the audience could go up to the screen or basically to a controller on this little podium, and they could take control of this experience, and they could drift through these landscapes and these scenes I have created. But also around, like alongside this screen, there was also 2 light installations. So one was actually a rotating light, a bit like the lighthouse you see within the screenshots. There was this physical rotating light installation that was also scanning the space within the church with fog and mist, and also this kind of light curtain at the entrance of the space that you were, as if you're going through the veil. So every visitor was kind of having an experience as if they're going
mm.
through this veiled into the other world, and was a very kind of mystical, metaphysical type of experience. And again, then they had to enter this other threshold, which was the screen, basically, and experience Benign Land. And even in one of the scenes, actually, that's how the game starts. You are in the same church where the installation was exhibited, so it had this self-referentiality into it. So, what was I talking before? I started talking about the
Yeah,
installation.
no, and I mean, you've answered, I think, a few of my questions there. So that's because
Mm.
I was going to ask you, why, well, how did this idea start, and why did I suppose, yeah, because so this game is essentially started in the church in Belfast, and did you go on now to make any changes to the game for before the release, or is this the same? Say, is this the
I
same
Yeah,
game that people
I th-
experienced?
I thought about kind of tweaking a bit so it's a bit more friendly for a game audience, because again, it's a very slow experience, kind of almost meditative. I don't know, even touching on horror at certain scenes, like without being a horror
Mm,
game, definitely, but it demands you to be immersed into it and into the pacing. And yeah, if you're used to quick FPS or RPG games, probably you'll get this is not for me. It's too slow. So I was thinking, okay, shall I put a bit more game elements inside, a bit more actions, interactions? You need to solve a bit of a puzzle to enter the next scene, but in the end, I decided to keep it kind of pure as it was, to not dilute the original vision that it had as
Mm.
an art experience, and also see if people are ready for this or not. It's a bit of an experiment, to be honest, and I am waiting for quite a lot of negative
No.
reviews or whatever. No, but again, because
Mm,
it might not be for everyone, and that's fine actually. um, I'm not here to make games for everyone, mass appeal. It's a very niche project,
mm.
very very unique and unconventional, but I stand behind this in a way. So to answer your question, I made very minor changes. Just okay, I had to build the whole UI part of it, like menus, etc. In the first scene where you start in the church, actually in the experience in Belfast, you were I had even the LED screen positioned inside the space. So that became the first portal. You need to approach the screen and enter it. Now, because it has been removed from that context, I also removed the LED screen. So anyway, the portal is like
Sure.
the other portals in the other scenes. And only one little kind of text note within the space. So actually, that's a very recent thing. When I started sending it out to reviewers and content creators, people were getting confused because it's a loop. So you end at the start, basically at the beginning scene, and then you can just keep going and you can just continue, because that was a bit the idea, that you're kind of trapped in this loop. And people were getting confused. They were like, I'm not sure, is there something happening, whatever. So I decided to put an element. It's still like a floating screen where it says, not a loop, this is not a line, this is a loop. So kind of hinting that this is a cyclical journey, and that's part of it, just to give them a hint, and not be too kind of confused about it. But it still fits the kind of the atmosphere and the narrative. But apart from that, almost no changes whatsoever.
Okay.
Yeah,
And yes, so it was. I'm gonna say I think this is the only game that I know of that is set entirely in Ireland. Was
yeah.
um, and again we've spoken about that you into installation in the church.
Mhm.
But I suppose why do you decide to make a game set about Ireland? Do
Right.
yourself, do you know a lot about Ireland? Presumably you probably do now. You like it, but um, yeah, why did you decide to make this game entirely set in Ireland and about Irish
Right.
history and culture?
Right.
Um,
Um, like
I mean, I'm fascinated. I'm delighted you did, but just curious because you're not Irish.
yeah, I
So,
get it definitely, and that's
but
a question that might pop up. Like, why is a
mm,
Greek person or
yeah,
game developer
It could be Greek mythology. There's a lot,
make a game about Ireland? And that's a very valid question. But
but I'm delighted that you did. But I'm just curious.
sure, it's fine.
um,
Um,
what
uh,
appealed to you about Ireland and Irish culture and history that you
mm,
made an entire game about it?
right. Uh, I have been attracted to Ireland since I was quite younger, since I visited it for the first time. So I think when I was 20 or so, I went to Dublin and then West Ireland and Galway and the Aran Islands and cliffs of Moher. So the place has, how do you say it? Ireland has soul. So just the landscape, just its nature, the elements, but also the people, the culture, the music, the literature. They resonate with me greatly. So I was interested into its literature, like James Joyce, and poetry, and its mythology and the pagan side, and the more material side of it. Like as a sculptor, for example, I was fascinated by the dry stone walls of Ireland. It might sound funny because yeah, there's stones stacked on top of each other, but they're
Mm,
done in such a ways and such elaborate designs that already it's like something clicked there, and I had used it in my sculptural work in a way when I was doing kind of land art installations. I had already been inspired by Ireland. So there was definitely a connection there, and many points of interest. I guess another one that I have to talk about and that relates with elements of the game is later on in my artistic research. I was exploring light and I was exploring the movement of the sun and the moon and how does this affects our sense of time or our being or our culture. So I was diving into this thing and I was diving into megalithic cultures and especially megalithic monuments and Stonehenge and Newgrange and menhirs and dolmens and try to figure out what these things mean in kind of how do you say, I guess philosophical anthropological way. I was very interested, so there was a lot of this type of questions and research that I had already done that it was very a natural continuation for me to put into this project. But everything clicked again, I guess, when I was invited to create a work in Ireland and especially Northern Ireland. I didn't know much about Northern Ireland before I went
Mm.
there for this artist residency. So I was invited by this organization called Household Belfast, and there also I reignited all my other interests about this place. Its culture. I dived even more into poetry, into literature, to its music, its traditions. But there I was confronted also with the history of the conflict and the troubles, because a place, especially Belfast, you see it everywhere. You see it in every corner, and
Mm-hmm.
I was confronted in almost a heavy way. Like the moment you go there, you see all these fences and barbed wire everywhere, and like the pubs have fences for anti-bombing kind of prevention, and still places are kind of how do you say, barricaded and blocked and deserted. And I dived into this history. I watched my documentaries. I read stuff online. I watched some films that are related to the troubles, like Hunger and another one, The Elephant. And everything was, it was definitely very interesting, but also a very heavy, of course, a topic to make something about. By the way, they didn't ask me to make something about the troubles. That was my own decision. But when my problem was that I had too many different elements that were inspiring to me and interesting to me. Like I like the pagan side, I like the megalithic monuments, I like the literature, the music, the kind of the history of the conflict, the kind of uh, urban military architecture, or how they merged together during the troubles, like the prison, for example. So it was many interests that were kind of, they seemed to be kind of separate from each other. And I was like, okay, how am I going to deal with this? How am I going to make a work that could potentially touch on all of these things that are very interesting and I want to say things about? And then through this idea of creating this kind of interactive experience, this gaming experience in Unreal Engine, it kind of gave me the freedom to touch on all these subjects, and especially through this kind of metaphysical experience, as if you're inside a subconscious experience. You're not in the real world, let's say. So I could afford to not have a very linear journey. It's kind of non-linear, and it jumps ahead. So there's huge jumps. It's not a historical game in the sense that it's a documentary. It just goes from place to place, and there's some threads unfolding about how one might connect to the other, but it doesn't need to make 100% sense as a
Mm.
linear experience. And even for people who know the context of Ireland, they will be kind of baffled of what these things might mean. Like, actually, it's interesting. Recently, a content creator played it, a young content creator on YouTube, and he was like, towards the end, he was like, Yeah, I don't actually like walking simulators, but that got me intrigued to try more, and
Wow.
it made me realize that I need to do more research on my own history, because he might have gotten some of the references, but the very first ones. But of course, he was not from Northern Ireland, so maybe he missed a bit of the context of the Troubles. But for people in Belfast who were raised, or who even lived through this period, it really had an impact in a way, and in different ways. So you could see younger generations, younger people like my age, or even they were like, that's very interesting. In some scenes, they said like that really manages to capture the experience we have as a generation that tries to avoid conflict, but it's always stuck in the middle or in between. Some older people that experienced it, they were not very handy with using a controller, and they were getting stuck, or maybe they were kept looking at the grass or at the sky. And then there was this lady, she said like, wow, that's actually, it makes absolute sense, because I see the younger generations can actually navigate this history, but my generation that has been through this conflict, it's completely paralyzed, and they cannot navigate it. They cannot even touch it. And I was like, wow, I would never have thought about it. That's very poetic. So um but yeah, I guess this type of, yeah, metaphysical subconscious experience gave me again this liberty, this freedom to combine different elements and put them together that were interesting to me, from Ireland as a whole and Northern Ireland, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, again, another fantastic answer. You've answered,
Mhm.
you know, one or two follow-up questions as well, so
Right.
that which is great. So thank you. But
Mhm.
and again, just very very quickly for context, of people
Mhm.
listening or watching who don't know the Troubles, because it's a strange thing that it's a lot of people
Yeah.
even outside of Northern Ireland, even including
Mhm.
I'm from the South and Republic, and we don't know a huge amount because
Yeah.
it felt like, certainly at the time that people were like putting their fingers in their ears, like we don't want to know, even if it's just like 2 or 3 hours away.
Yeah.
But it was what was called for sectarian violence over
Mhm.
period of several decades, and it was absolutely horrific.
Yeah.
Of well, Catholics and Protestants, and there's a lot more to it. But that's basically then there's a Good Friday Agreement, and there is peace now, as you mentioned. But you can still see the
Yeah.
barbed wire. You can still see there have been
The
films
peace walls.
there.
Mhm.
It's well, I went up to Belfast. I think it was the first time, it was several years ago with my family
Mhm.
to Belfast in July.
Right. Right.
And again, for people, outside of Ireland, July is a special time for
Mhm.
the, shall we say, the Protestants, that they're going to marches. But then there's this conflict with the Catholics, and the hostel that we were staying in was in Sandy Row, which is the heartland for those people in Northern
Yeah.
Ireland. And we went up with our Irish car, and those people don't like Irish people very
Mhm.
much.
Yeah.
And there was barbed wire, and it was a very interesting experience because it's not in the south of Ireland, the Republic, we don't have that at all. Really,
Mhm.
it's far from perfect, but yeah, it felt like two very different places, very
Yeah.
different histories, recent, modern, past and history. But yeah, we went around in Northern Ireland, and so yeah, and I can see the impact that it has. And it's also this year, or last year rather. Well, I don't know if you've seen the film Kneecap, which has
I
been
saw.
getting
Yeah.
awards, and
I was amazing. Yeah.
yeah, and it's set during the time of peace, but you can still see the conflict that is resonating
Yeah.
between them.
I mean, some of the core elements that
Excuse me.
kind of gave rise to the troubles are still in a way present. There's a lot to say about the subject, and again, I'm not the
Oh,
best
we could
person
we
to
could
do that.
spend hours on this because it's a lot of people
But
have studied it from just books and films and documentaries. But yes, I'm sorry, Leandros here.
no, there are elements to it, like of course the also the role of the UK and the British sending the army there as peace troops, and then
Well,
causing certain events that are very bloody events, let's say, and that kind of gave rise to this whole how do you say, upheaval, like a small revolution from the Catholic
Mm.
communities and the civil rights movements. And maybe the saddest part is like indeed this sectarian aspect of it. That it became like, yeah, neighbors killing each other basically,
Yeah, it was
and
absolutely horrific.
people that were living more or less peacefully before, like they got segregated, and that created tons of ripple effects everywhere, because it was 30 years, and again people are still going through, and they're really trying hard to go through it and resolve it, and live in peace, and I think they're doing great actually. And how the young people have managed to kind of come in terms with it and still live,
Absolutely,
and,
yes. It's
that's amazing to see. And Belfast as a city, and trying to bring some growth, and get rid of kind of, not the stigma, like the heaviness of it, the trauma, like it's very nice to see how they're trying to overcome this traumatic
absolutely.
event.
I think it gives hope as well. I know it mentioned that there's still conflict, but as you said, that especially the younger generations, they seem to be. What I also saw was people just coming together, that they don't really care about the religions or anything, that they are coming
Definitely.
together, a lot of them, and you can see that it's becoming vibrant and
Yeah.
modern at Belfast now. And Game of Thrones was filmed in Northern Ireland and several other things, so it's really becoming
Yeah.
an international place now. Which and they are, and I think it can bring hope to other, because there was a lot of conflict around the world, very, very
Mm,
tragically. But if you think, well, we can't resolve this, just look at Northern Ireland. While far
mm,
from perfect, it shows that there is hope and possibility. But it's and also bring it back to your game. It's great from those
mm.
people that played the game, that said the impact it has had on them. And I
Yeah.
suppose, what do you think to it being a game brought to people? Because I don't know. I'm sure some people might think, well, why not just make a film or a documentary? What do you
Mm.
think it's the fact that it was a game, brings to the
That,
project and adds
that's
to
a
it?
very, that's a very good question, and I think it's very crucial and to the core of why games matter, and why I decided
Exactly.
to dig games, because I like to see games as kind of the total work of art of the 21st century. So there's this notion from the history of art, the Gesamtkunstwerk, or the total work of art, that started with the opera. So it's basically an art form that brings together all other art forms together. So you have like narrative, you have art, visuals, you have sound, but also in games you have immersion through interactivity. So people are not passive observers anymore, like as if you would watch a series or a
Hmm.
film or a documentary. But now you can have a sense of control and agency in the experience you're having. Whether that's a lot of control, a lot of interactivity, a lot of experience, or even more minimal experience, but still, the moment someone gives you control, and then you have like this kind of just movement in space, immediately you are part of this, whether you like it or not. You have choice, you have control. And I think that's one of the very powerful elements of games, and that I feel is going to be picked up even by other types of creatives, like I used to be, because it has it can create a very impactful and strong experience that can elevate all the rest. Like again, graphics can be nice, story, narrative, music, but altogether they come to something that becomes greater than the sum of the parts. So, but especially for that exhibition, for that installation, for people from Belfast to be in their city and be able to experience and navigate scenes that nowadays you cannot go to. So to go into a bit more specific things, like there are certain scenes that are inside the maze prison, also known as Long Kesh, which is one of the prisons that was very crucial for the troubles. So many political prisoners went there, and there were some major events, like of course the dirty strikes and the hunger strikes, and gave rise to some kind of local heroes like Bobby Sands, this prison, you cannot visit it anymore. It's been mostly demolished. They haven't found a way to make it into a place of historical interest so you could actually visit it. I think they decided it's too traumatic to open it to the public. So now I think they've kept only one H block, as they're called, one part of this prison, and you cannot go even close by. So I tried when I was in the residency, I tried to go there to just get some pictures, get a sense of the place. You couldn't go near it. There was some sort of security. They have an airfield close by now where the prison was, and I could just see the watchtowers from a distance. So it's a place that it belongs to the past of this place and the collective consciousness or subconsciousness, but still it's kind of far away. They try to keep it far away, and maybe you can see it in a documentary or in a film. So I gathered footage, historic footage, the documentary photography, and I tried to recreate it as accurately as I could. Of course, I could go even more, but there's two scenes, like one in the exterior corridors of the prison and one in the interior corridor of the prison. Just to bring back to your question, like to be able to navigate these spaces, even though it's a very minimal experience, it doesn't take long. I know it's very heavy, so I didn't want to create or how do you say, trigger any PTSD responses. So I tried to be very careful with all these things, but still just to be able to navigate these scenes in this kind of realistic environment, like again powered by tools like Unreal Engine, and of course with the evocative atmospheric elements that I inserted in a way as part of this kind of dreamlike experience. I think it was a created a very unique and very evocative experience that you cannot have by watching a documentary about it or looking at a photograph. And actually, many of the other scenes are also places that are actual locations in Belfast that I did scan myself with 3D tools, like with photogrammetry. So yeah, some pubs, for example, from this area, it's called Sailor Town, which was very vibrant, very thriving. But then after the troubles, it got kind of deserted. People have to relocate because they built a big highway. Anyway, so places that they knew by being in the city, immediately they were seeing in this kind of completely new way, also way more abstract way. And they were coming in a dialogue with them, and actually it was very interesting because many people started telling me things I didn't know and I couldn't have known. They were like, that's the neighborhood where my father grew up, and they got married in that church, and then they had to leave, and that meant this and this and this. So people kind of, by going through this experience, they started opening up. And I think that's also the strength of art, whatever that is, games, literature, film. Again, if you're doing communication, opening dialogue, leaving things for interpretation. So I think it was a kind of very interesting and, I would say, successful experiment or presentation to put that
Yeah, no,
interactive experience in that context, for
yeah,
especially for a non-gaming audience.
mm,
It wasn't gamers; it was your everyday folk that just went into the church because they were curious of what's happening inside. Young people, old people, you name it.
yeah, no, fantastic. Yeah, no, as you mentioned, I think the fact that it's interactive, that you're there, you are, controlling it. I think that does make a difference. But yeah, no, that's fantastic. Now I could spend hours talking about this. I mean, we spoke a little about the visuals. As said before, you are an artist, and
Hmm.
every you mentioned you use Unreal Engine, and every screen it looks like a painting.
Yeah.
I know I don't want to keep you too much longer, um, but but yeah, no, that's it. Just people watch the screenshot, watch the trailers and the screenshots. Um, I don't know if you wanted to. I don't even know what to ask anymore about the visuals because we've spoken. But I suppose,
Uh,
how did you bring the your experience as an artist? For your what you were trying to, your
mm,
objectives with the look of the game, because the look of the game, it does have a dreamlike quality
yeah.
to the screens. And I suppose, how did you go about bringing your experience as an artist and
Mhm.
as a painter to the
Uh,
game with Unreal Engine. I don't know if
yeah,
that makes sense. As I said, I'm not an artist myself, so
I'm gonna try my best. Again, it's not that easy
and
for
then I will
me
let you go. I will.
to put. No, it's fine.
I
I'm
won't keep you
enjoying this.
too long.
Uh, I guess through being into this visual arts world and whatever, you constantly kind of um, sharpen your perception and your sensitivities about aesthetics, about light, about space. And then with Unreal Engine, you're building spaces. You have traversal, you have yeah, darkness and light, and perception works in a very similar ways. Like that's the strength of these tools. Like they're very close to reality. So for me, it's a natural continuation to start composing for the spaces, but of course without the limitations of a physical space. So when I'm installing a work in a church, yeah, you cannot have a ethereal screen, light screen hanging in the middle of the air, or if you do, you need to kind of do it very in a very elaborate way. But within tools like Unreal Engine, of course, you can afford composing with different elements, so then it liberates you. So for example, I could still use like lighting and this kind of lighthouses that kind of constantly rotate around, that I even have had in the physical space, but now they're floating in there, they can move in space, you have this kind of ethereal screens. And at the end of the day, it's about what feeling you want to convey through this experience. And one of my first kind of design choices that I try to keep a lot is like, again, have this feeling as if you're floating in a dream, as if you don't have a body, you're discorporated or whatever would be called. And through that, so that's also game feel, how the controls
Mm,
work. There's a lot of like this floating movement, but also by the visuals. Many scenes are quite dark. There's a lot of mist and haze. There's this kind of post-process effects that kind of warp the image again, like sometimes, but altogether combined together with the sound. I haven't spoken about the sound, but it's actually a very important element of the
another thing I
experience.
didn't get to ask you about.
Yeah, yeah. So all these sensitivities come together to hopefully an interesting experience, and quite unconventional. It might leave you a bit kind of awkward and confused as a gamer in a way, because again, it doesn't follow almost any of the conventions of games. But still, I hope it will be a experience that you take things out of, and that makes you wonder and think, and you try to decode these kind of cryptic elements, these symbolic elements that I've used throughout. So there are things to it, you can keep that digging basically, and these elements connect with the history, with mythology, with all kind of things. But perhaps most importantly, to answer your question about how the art background kind of relates to that, I think it has to do with a certain, again, not being afraid to leave things open, to leave things unexplained, to leave things even yeah, a bit dark and obscure, even for yourself as a creator. Like again, because I use a lot of symbolism and
Mm,
elements, I know that mo- maybe very few people will start understanding what that might mean. But still, as an experience, as an image, as you said, as even like watching a painting, it still does something to you, it still resonates, and then you might start creating your own interpretations. So I don't want to mouth feed anyone in kind of having my point of view about this or how I thought
mm,
about this. But it's, again, it's hiding more things to it that you might understand from one playthrough. And in that sense, most of my inspirations were actually not from games. They were from different art mediums. They were from literature. They were from yeah, writers like James Joyce, especially his book Finnegan's Wake, which is a very
mm,
cryptic book, very symbolic, very abstract, or poetry. Like I really dived into Seamus Heaney, for example, as a poet, and his
Seamus Heaney, yes.
interviews and his poems. And that was more inspiring than any other game in a way for creating Benign Land. Maybe some films, like there's a great film by Gaspar Noé called Enter the Void, which is again this kind of after death experience, like you see all the movie through the eyes of the soul of a person who has recently died. um so yeah, like again, this freedom to step away from convention and just do something that it is its own thing, and maybe people will like it, maybe not, but I think it proposes something quite unique. um
Yeah, no, fantastic. I mean, look, whatever happens, at least this is your vision, and it's certainly not
mm.
a game by committee. Like a lot
Yeah,
of,
yeah, yeah,
mainly AAA games that are, seems like yeah, well, let's tick box here, and this game is not
yeah.
that. It looks like so.
I mean, that's a good thing with indie development. If you
Absolutely.
do so small projects with great tools, again, like Unity and Unreal, like you have the freedom to explore sides of this medium and games that, yeah, you just couldn't do with huge teams. And
Mm,
I like only very few companies and people can come closer, and that's people have earned it, again, like Kojima,
mm,
like Remedy, like these people can push the boundaries a bit, but even they're constrained by, yeah, will this game make its money back? I,
absolutely. So
I didn't really have this in that case. Again, there was a commission, and I still hope it will make some money to
hopefully would be great.
to feed into my other project. So, but that was definitely not the goal of this game. It's not a commercial project. It's very much an passion project and an art project at
Mm.
heart. Let's say,
I think you
yeah.
can tell. Well, hopefully people will buy it, will play it, and will enjoy it. It is Benign Land, and I will include links in the
Hmm.
show notes and in the description. But and it's available on Steam at the time of release. Well, the 24th of January 2025. It
Yeah,
will be released. It's
exactly.
released at this date.
Yeah.
But yeah, is there anything else you wanted to mention about
Yeah,
this
yeah,
game?
because I just touched on it.
Yeah,
Like the sound
the
is very
sound,
important
yes.
element. For that, I collaborated with a Belfast-based sound designer, sound artist, composer called John Darcy. He's also a lecturer at Queen's University Belfast, and together with him, I already had some ideas. I brought them to him, and he managed to compose a very beautiful soundscape for each scene that deals with the sonic past of Ireland. So everything there has some connection with, again, Ireland, beat kind of reciting a poem in the background from Heaney, or the voice of Joyce as an echo of again, a memory of a kind of distant past, or keenings, Irish keenings are included, fiddles, and but all in this kind of abstracted, dreamlike way. So that it's a bit hard to explain if you don't
Mm,
experience it for yourselves. But I think it really came together and really bound everything together. It really added to the experience, and I think really sets also the tone and the vibe, apart from the visuals, for this experience. And again, like in the sound, you're hiding little symbolical elements, little pieces, little piece of information that might help for unfolding this more, yeah, cryptic story or narrative, whatever
mm,
you want to call it.
fantastic.
Um,
Well, I am, as again, an Irish person, I'm delighted to hear the names James Joyce and Seamus Heaney as
yeah, yeah.
inspirations because, I mean, I was never really hugely into poetry, but I did love reading
Mm,
Seamus, and not because he's Irish, but I loved his poetry, they kind of,
yeah,
I was like, yeah, no, I really, this speaks to me kind of. And I'm not like that with a lot of poetry. That's not, I'm more literal.
yeah,
But
yeah, 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 yeah,
usually, but I really liked his
yeah.
poems, and
I, I have to mention here that I have to give him credit for the title of the game. because I was watching some interviews and somewhere he mentioned he was talking about Irish landscape and he talked about a benign landscape. So like that's a good. I love this phrase, and then I wrote it somewhere. Then I came back to it, like actually that could be, and it just
And it
really
became the
fits.
title.
Yeah, again, this paradox of benign land, especially with touching on the conflict and everything, but
Absolutely.
also just the Irish landscape. It has this softness, this element, this vibrance. Yeah, he was definitely a huge inspiration for this
Oh,
game.
fantastic. Well, look, I think it might find its audience because I think that there are people out there, not necessarily just gamers. First of all, it's people who play adventure games, and because there are,
Mm,
there's games like Journey, Dearest There. I haven't played them, but I've heard that they are more like, kind of spiritual, metaphysical as well, meditative games
yeah,
as well. So
yeah,
I think that there is a market that I think people, certainly if you are, going through a lot of stress or long day at work and you want to come home,
yeah.
you don't want to necessarily play maybe a first person shooter, fast paced game. You just
Sure.
want a game to just relax to. And I think this game sounds like it could be
Yeah,
as well. And it's very different to anything else that I've seen.
yeah.
Um,
It is
so
different. Like that is one of the long term visions of the studio, to create games or interactive experiences that can appeal to different audiences. So I don't want to. That's a big conversation, but I feel there's still a bit of a stigma in games in terms of like for the from the general public, that games are a waste
absolutely.
of time. They're not worth my time. They're not. I'd rather spend 2 or 8 or 20 hours to watch a good series on Netflix or HBO, but I
But
won't
games
spend
are,
the
yeah,
same time for games because they're for children, And I think that is also valid in many ways. I think games are close to that in some ways, or certain types of games, but definitely the potential is there for creating the best possible, most meaningful type of art. But also there are already games out there that do that, and I think it's a
yeah,
pity that still there is the stigma, and people who could experience this and take so much out of it, like myself, like how I was 5 years ago when I was not playing games because I thought I had better things to do with my time. I think it's a pity, and I think in the coming years we will see uh, the market opening up to new audiences. And I hope that this will be done also with the help of new technologies, like now with cloud streaming, like with Xbox is doing this kind of big push to where everything is an Xbox. You don't need to have a console. You just need a screen and an internet connection, and then you can experience the things. So kind of democratize a
right,
bit
yeah.
more games and open them up to a different audience. Uh, Maybe not my grandma, but like
You never
my
know.
generation, definitely. Maybe even my parents. That they're actually very curious to, oh, what is that?
Yeah,
I
well,
also want to give it a go.
I was just
But
thinking that my father was an English teacher before he retired, and
mm,
he loves James Joyce and Seamus Heaney. So I think I'm going to tell him, hey, look, well, there's a game, that you might enjoy, that you love
take it to
poetry,
him.
and
Yeah,
so yeah, and
you
you never
never know.
know,
It's a very
which
poetic experience. Yeah.
fantastic. Now, before we finish up, because so that is
Mhm.
Benign Land, and again, links will be there. But you mentioned again very very quickly that you're working on a next project. Now, it
Yeah,
is a little. There is a short, very short paragraph about it on the
on the
website, but
website.
already I'm
Yeah,
interested. It seems very different to this game. Um,
yeah. It is
what can it
different
do?
and
Well,
and
different maybe
similar.
in the way, but yeah,
Mm.
different. Yeah. Anyway, I'll let you.
It-
What can you tell us again very
so,
quickly because I
so
don't want to keep you
it
too long.
it's still unannounced, so I cannot say that much. But actually, I've been working on it for quite some time before even I started working on Benign Land, trying to get a publisher for it and funding. It's an ambitious project in the sense that it also tries quite some new things. It's more of a game. It's more of an adventure.
Okay.
It's a, I guess, narrative heavy adventure, basically psychological thriller adventure with some supernatural elements set in the Balkans, and it's heavily inspired by European art house cinema. So it's very cinematic, very atmospheric. It uses cinematic language without using too many cinematics, and yeah, it has influence from directors like, I don't know, from Andrei Tarkovsky to David Lynch. So it tries to do a branching dialogue and branching narrative adventure in the likes of Disco Elysium, but combined with a third person approach, and a bit of a survival, supernatural survival elements to it. So it tries to combine again the depth of a CRPG with gameplay and certain gameplay actions of a third person adventure, basically. I don't know if that explains it, but
Well, I'm
my,
curious.
my
I'm
pitch line is
intrigued.
Disco Elysium meets Silent Hill 2 and Death Stranding, and they go to a trip to the Balkans, if that makes any sense. It's an ambitious project. It's quite a large one, and but it's very promising already. It has shown potential. So
and,
fingers crossed, I will find the
and
means to make it a reality.
and do you have a team to help you make this game yet, or are you still working? Yep.
I,
Well,
I, I so far I've been working quite flexibly in the sense that I have received some cultural grants here from the Netherlands, and I have assembled a team of freelancers. So like not full time contract, but now I'm seeking for the funding to bring this to the next stage. So now I'm recruiting my Warriors team to get this to the next stage and get it out in the world. And yeah.
perfect. Well, I look forward. Be delighted to have you on the podcast again to talk about that because it sounds fascinating
Yeah,
as
yeah.
well, and I look forward to playing Benign Land and hopefully getting my father to play it as well.
I'd be very
He,
very interested. Like let me know
I
how
will
that
let you
goes.
know,
I'm very
and yeah, look, hopefully you'll be in Ireland sometime. I'll be delighted to. I think we could, speak for several hours over a couple of pints. We could.
couple of pints. That sounds lovely. Are you based in Dublin yourself?
I am in the south of Ireland in Waterford.
Waterford. Okay, I'll
But I'd
keep
be
it in mind.
delighted. But look, well, but I can go to Dublin, as well. It's very close. But
All right.
is there anything else that you wanted to mention before? So where can people find you? Actually, that's
E-
the
Exactly. So people can
again,
find
links
me
will be
on
in the show notes and the description. But yeah, where can people find you?
social media, like under my name, Leandros Ntolas, but also After Nature Productions, Instagram, Blue Sky, X. We're still there,
Yeah,
but
I know it's for. I'm kind of thinking how long, but
yeah. But Blue Sky is picking up, and it's very nice.
yeah, good.
But also, it helps a lot if you really want to keep in touch with the studio to subscribe to the newsletter.
Which I
Like
did. Yeah.
it's not that we send out too many news, or it's going to be spam, but at least then we know that we can reach you because social media change. So if you subscribe there, you never know what happens in 2 years, and we've seen that already. So just yeah, follow us wherever you're using in whatever social media or outlets, and in the coming the in the recent future we will also probably open up our Discord to start raising, kind of gathering a bit of a community there, but closer to the announcement of our second title.
Perfect.
um
Well, look, I look forward to hearing more about it.
Definitely.
Well, look, thank you so much, Leandros. Is there anything else that you wanted to mention before we finish up? I know we've covered a lot and I've kept you longer than I
No, no,
said I
no.
would, but
No,
yeah,
just I think we covered enough. Just big shout out to Ireland itself. It's been a huge
thank you.
inspiration. It's music, it's people, it's culture. So you're you're the hero here, and I hope I managed to touch on that culture, that history, in an interesting and respectful way. Like again, I understand that I'm coming here as an outsider, talking about something that is it's not my culture, and I try to do it in the
You're
best
welcome.
possible
You're
way. Yeah.
we yeah
So
we welcome pretty much. I mean, especially St. Patrick's Day, where the whole world is Irish.
right, right,
But
right.
no, we and I think you probably bring an interesting perspective,
Mhm.
from outside as well. But no, thank you for that. And again, that's not the reason I got you on the podcast. I'm genuinely interested and I look forward to playing it.
Right.
But yeah, no, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast. And yeah, no, absolutely. I
Yeah.
will let you know impressions, and I hope the game does well, and I look forward to hearing about your next game and anything
Please,
you do in the
let me know
future.
what you think, and even to the listeners or viewers, like please feel free to reach out. We're always open. We want to keep this an open dialogue. You know what resonated, what didn't. We're always very interested
Perfect.
to hear feedback. So yeah, feel free.
Perfect. Well, the very, very
Uh,
best of luck with the game's release,
Thank you so much.
and we'll chat very, very soon.
Thank you so much for having me here. It was a pleasure talking to you and giving you a bit more
Thank
insight
you.
into the
Likewise.
process
Thank you.
behind Benign Land. And yeah, we'll be in touch. Okay.